within 48 hours, you're going to have a dream.
Welcome to the Blue Door Playbook, a podcast for the soul, featuring the work and wisdom of archetypal psychotherapist Timothy Tate. I'm your host, Putter Brown. Episode 6, Perfection. So the last time we left, you mentioned the words perfection, compensation.
I did.
Yeah. And
yeah,
what does it
Where do we
bring?
go from
Yeah,
there?
where do we go from there?
Yeah, although that sounds complicated, it's pretty straightforward. So let me, deconstruct it for a moment. So the original wound in our psychology is this belief that somehow by our nature, we're inadequate. So that sense of inadequacy undermines a person's confidence and capacity to be genuine to their nature, if there is such a thing, which I believe there is. And so there are a number of compensations, and let's talk a minute about compensation. Compensation is a psychological term where we are substituting something for something else, or we're making up for something by doing something else. So if I'm feeling fat, I'll compensate by going on a diet. The problem is, if you don't understand why you got obese, a diet's not going to help. It'll just be a temporary relief or a sense of satisfaction because I'm doing something about my obesity. So the compensation is an attempt to cover up or make better something that is broken, but not in a way that addresses the nature of the wound. And so, kind of like a dog chasing its tail, there's a lot of action, but not going anywhere. And same with a compensation. Now, compensation comes from the Freudian playbook, and it's one of the theories that he and depth psychologists birthed in the turn of the century and into the early 20th century that I think has great merit. So perfectionism is a compensation for feeling inadequate. And that sense of feeling inadequate is what we call shame. I'm ashamed, shame. Because somewhere along the journey, and I can give us a little insight as to what that journey is as well, we bought the lie that we're not good enough. And once you make that agreement with yourself, and you won't do that deliberately, it will be a gradual process over childhood that is reinforced by a couple of powerful forces. The society's idea of normal and the school system's idea of normal. And I won't go off on how the school system is complicit with socialization and wounding our children by feeling inadequate, but I could, but maybe for another time. So what I'm saying is that projection is a way in which we displace, these are all terms, projection, displace, projection, compensation. Projection is a way we displace our wound onto something else, or more importantly, somebody else that we can blame. So there are a handful of classic, so to speak, compensations for feeling inadequate. We're dealing with perfection. At least we're talking about that today. But like I mentioned, there are other ones such as blame, withdrawing, contempt.
And perfection is a way I don't feel the shame, or I mask it, or
Yeah, more mask.
more of a mask.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And this is my major compensation is perfectionism. So I'm talking from a place of personal experience and then psychological authority over the years. But let's just reel the tape back for a moment, and I'll share a bit of my personal story, which has to do with Christianity, which is the third hammer: socializing, public schools, Christianity. So my father was a Presbyterian minister, and he was not very tall, and he was from Northern Ireland. And so his form of Presbyterianism was a force that hammered me as a child. And of course, sin is a big term in Christianity, both original and otherwise. And sin is a way of talking about shame. Because in the good book, it says we were born inadequate. And we have to spend our life and perhaps afterlife, which is just so torrid, such a scam. Anyway, compensating for that. And perfectionism is mine, because I learned as a wee lad in a congregation in the suburbs of Chicago in the 50s and 60s, the power of the pulpit, where I would see my father have 3 services every Sunday with 300 people each service.
Wow.
Giving a sermon, telling the people the truth in his eyes. And so witnessing that, he had great authority. Let's put it that way.
Wow.
There's lots of ways of being an absent father. Guys take a lunchbox and go to work and come home thrashed 10 hours later. And many different ways that fathers influence their children. But when it comes to perfectionism, my father was a prince of inducing that. And my mother, let's talk about my mother. My mother, in her own passive way, fortified that sense of his authority, hence the truth of what he's saying, hence I'm inadequate, hence I'm fairly intelligent. I'll figure this out. I'll be perfect.
When someone comes to your office, someone comes to the Blue Door, and they show you something similar, like their own version of perfection, how do you help them see it, or how do you help them?
Yeah. Take a moment and have a prayer. Oh, God. Yeah. It's that's the question. How do we affect perfectionism? And the first move is to have them tell me a story. Some people would not even realize that that's their issue. They wouldn't come through the Blue Door and say, I'm suffering from perfectionism. Rather, I would hear in their introduction, in their storytelling for the first session, a story of control, of needing to be in control, which is another way of talking about perfectionism. Mm-hmm. What drives the need to be in control? We're free falling. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Actually, this morning on one of my feeds, there was a quote from Alan Watts about the beauty of and the naturalness of a cat falling. A cat just goes limp when it falls. It doesn't go rigid and try to control the fall. It just goes with the fall, which I thought was an interesting angle and, in my experience, true to the way I've seen our cats fall. It's quite remarkable, you know. And if a human's falling, struggling, trying to, cat goes, gets limp.
Nice.
And Watts was making the point that might be a lesson for us, uptight, controlling, perfectionistic humans.
Mm-hmm. And how many people coming into the Blue Door, it almost seems like everyone needs to discover.
I was going to say about 90%.
Yeah.
Yep. You know, the society we have prizes excellence, is competitive, and has a hero worship theme. And so the heroes in our society are men and women, heroes and heroines, who have somehow beat the game, somehow have been successful. And in those stories, we hear stories of discipline, which is tremendous, motivation, you bet. But the shadow of all that is the need to control their environment and often their families, their wives or husbands and children towards some perceived goal of normal.
When I came to the Blue Door, it didn't take long for me to have an experience out in the world, bring it to you. And your comment to me was, that shows us your shame tank is full.
Yeah.
And
I almost remember that.
Do you? Yeah.
The shame tank is full, yeah.
Yep. So I had an experience out in the world, came to the Blue Door, told you the story, tried to con someone who trusted me in a drunken New Year's Eve moment. And with a bunch of people in New York City, and tried to basically get a limousine that wasn't mine for a joyride.
Oh, excellent.
And the man who trusted me came back and said, you know, kind of busted me. And in that bust, in that moment, I felt horrible. Suddenly, I wasn't drunk and high, ready to go out on the town. I felt terrible. Bringing that story to you, your comment to me was, first of all, Jesus Christ himself would have tried to get that limousine. Second, you said, we're going to need to apologize to Jason. You know, you're going to have to go at that, which was a letter and well received, and we were clear.
Okay.
But what your comment was it shows your shame tank is full. And the next thing you said to me was, we don't have enough time to empty it slowly. You said, we need some dynamite. And so people come to the Blue Door. Is that a common story where everyone who faces their shame tank needs some dynamite?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, as explosive as that term sounds, it just refers to something fundamental, to a fundamental change, not tinkering with boulders and rocks, but blow the whole thing up, which is part of my assertive, I don't know if it's aggressive, but I'm really forthright and direct. And when I hear something in a session, particularly that first session, which is basically an assessment of reading the room, finding what matters to the person who's talking to me, and then I pay particular attention to the words being used and will then stop the person as they're talking and say, "Did you hear what you just said?" And usually we don't. We're just, probably nervous. I know I would be. Walking through the blue door on Main Street in Bozeman, Montana, and coming into a closed space with this guy is like, oh. And so it's direct and probing, and always will have a task, as you described. I gave you a task to ground the concern we have in some particular challenge, specific challenge.
And shame, the story you were sharing about your father and mother, there's a part of me that thinks there might be no one who understands it the way you do.
True.
With your 40 years of psychotherapy practice and your childhood relationship to being perfect or being ashamed for being inadequate. And 90% of the people come to the Blue Door with a similar feeling of
version of that.
Yeah, some version of that. So you mentioned that there were some other cover-ups. Perfection.
Withdrawal. Contempt. Blame. I've said in the past there are about 5 compensations, but the ones I just mentioned, perfection, withdrawing, contempt, and, withdrawing is the key one. So I would say in order of popularity, perfectionism, and then withdrawing, and then blame, and then contempt. Those are all attempts to compensate, cover up for feeling shamed.
And what kind of tasks do you give people to go at the shame piece, how to discover it?
Well, I think you mentioned that I had you write a letter. I find that that's an important first step. Let's say we've identified through their story what a scene was or a situation was that one of the parents kind of introduced in a significant way this shame demon. And so often it might mean to write a letter to the mother or father or the guardian or the grandparents or whoever the demon was that was cheerleading some form of inadequacy. And that can often be older siblings as well. So writing a letter is usually step number 1. And then the question is often, do I have to send this? I go, well, bring it in and let's hear it. But yeah. And sometimes they're unable to talk to or write to the shamer because that person's passed. And I'm so militant about finding the origin story of our shame, the task will be to go to the cemetery and address the deceased or do some sort of act that changes the shame complex from an unconscious cluster to something that is accessible, that we become more aware and conscious of the demon I'm describing.
Someone's tasked to go to the cemetery and address the deceased. That's their dynamite.
Yes.
Yeah.
That's right, Butter.
Yeah. Nice. What does withdraw look like as a compensation for
Yeah.
shame?
So I'll just keep it personal. When I'm feeling inadequate, and I had a pretty good bout of that this week, and perhaps it has to do with the injury and a number of other physical factors. Aging is a trip. But withdrawal for me is I get silent. And it's pretty menacing. You know, I have a large persona. I'm a big guy. And when I'm wrestling with a particular shame demon, of feeling inadequate and withdraw, it doesn't mean I go upstairs and lock myself in my room, although I will often retreat and withdraw up into my room until this shame seizure passes. And basically, my method for that withdrawing is to withdraw rather than sit with my wife, Susan, in that dark state. We're talking about a mood. And subject her to that. So by withdrawing, I take that energy and tend to it on my own. And I have certain ways of releasing that, having to do with breath work and other things I've learned over the years to calm that lie. Because I chose in my unconsciousness in that time or that day or that moment to believe the lie. You know, and from my childhood again, I have, and many of us have, an iconic moment where shit went down. And my iconic moment was with my mom, of course, in the kitchen, in the Presbyterian manse, where I was wrestling with this notion that my father preached about called eternity. Do a podcast on eternity. See if you go psychotic. Sure. Eternity, right. And so I asked my mom, eating breakfast, I must have been, 9, 10, somewhere in there, late childhood. How do you know, Mom, when you're saved? And she was doing dishes. She took her hands out of the sink, dried them, turned around to me and goes, "Well, Timmy, you just never know." And I went, "What? What? No, you just never know." So that hammered me with, even though I was going to try to be a perfect little boy, and if you see pictures of me, you're looking at a perfect little boy. Being a PK in society as a preacher's kid is its own burden. It's my own cross to bear, man. Jesus, so to speak.
Yeah.
They're everywhere. Yeah, her saying that gave me a deeply active sense of both insecurity and inadequacy. Just tell me what I have to do. Yeah. I'll do it. I'll do it well. I'll go to college. I'll get straight A's. I don't know. What do you want? What will save me? You never know, Timmy.
Whoa. Another compensation you mentioned was contempt. Help me understand that.
Yeah. Yeah. Contempt is a form of envy. In other words, I can only have contempt for what makes me feel inadequate. If I didn't feel inadequate, I wouldn't have any need to blame or have contempt. But But contempt, and it's almost an archaic word. It doesn't roll off the tongue.
Mm-hmm.
Contempt is a way of feeling superior.
Right. Yeah. I was thinking above.
Yep.
If I feel above you, or
Yep.
if I feel superior to you, then I won't feel ashamed. And
I'll still feel ashamed, but this is my way of trying to beat that by being superior. Again, otherwise I wouldn't have to feel superior.
Mm-hmm. The feeling of shame is the spark. The
Yes.
first thing. And I'm feeling it, but I'm going to compensate with contempt.
Yep.
As long as I can feel above you, superior to you,
Yep.
then I got my shame covered up.
Yep.
Wow.
For the situation,
For the
moment.
moment.
Yeah,
Yeah,
that's
yeah,
right,
yeah.
Butter.
And the other one you mentioned was blame.
Mm-hmm.
What does that's pretty easy to describe, but give me an example of someone behind the blue door who's using that to cover up shame.
Yeah. Blame really is a effective and sneaky way to project that feeling of inadequacy onto something or someone else. It can be an inanimate object. It can be the way that a software doesn't load. Then when, God damn it, get fired up that something's not working like it should. And so we blame X person or object or system for, and of course we're frustrated, but blame has a darker shadow to it because it's coming from this superior place. I had a moment in my office when I'm working on an essay and looking out of my office window onto Main Street, tapping away my little iPad, and it wasn't responding. The keyboard wasn't responding. And the screen had a keyboard, but I hate that. It's just deek, 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 deek. And so I was getting frustrated, and I was blaming the iPad for my experience, for my being pissed off. Just like, Tate, you're 76 years old. We've been around this before. Easy. Because impatience is a part of this whole energy we're talking about too. And I can be a really patient man, particularly when I'm in service to others, but I'm really impatient with myself. And so I was impatient and blaming the iPad for the psychological experience I was having. How am I doing? Jesus.
And the word victim pops up in my mind in relationship to blaming.
Mm-hmm. There you go. Now you're opening a chamber of hell.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Victimhood.
Mm-hmm.
That's one of the most menacing forms of psychological trickery. It's so seductive. It's so self-righteous. It is quite the, what kind of move? I'm not sure what the word would be. But blaming, being a victim and blaming others is the actual core, for instance, of a borderline personality. When it gets ingrained within the person's psyche, the root system of borderline personality is blame. Is being a victim.
I remember you saying to me one time about that root system, my misery is your fault.
That's right.
Like a baseline belief.
Yep.
Or something that you can create over and over.
Yep.
My misery is your fault.
That's a mantra many people swear to. It seems like blaming others and falling prey to the idea that you're at the mercy of others, being a victim, seems like a strange way to go to base an identity on. And when that victimhood is in play, it's palpable. It's like, oh, okay. And when I do see that behind the blue door, when I've identified, and I don't overly diagnosis, but I do diagnosis for people's insurance and other goofy things. But if I, in my own mind, assess individual A as being at the mercy of a personality disorder, specifically borderline personality, I refer them out of my practice.
When you told me that story, you need dynamite. When you said we can't empty this shame bucket slowly, you need dynamite. When you prescribe dynamite,
Right?
how many people come back and make it happen?
Yeah. 4 out of 10, not high odds. But again, if I see, this is my limitation as a therapist. If I see any evidence of a personality disorder, I have to refer them to some other professional. And so I skewer my odds of success by simply going, I can't work with you. Here's what I see, and I'll diagnose it for them so they have a name for it. But we're not going to be able to work together.
Is there a long list of these personality disorders?
No.
Short list.
It's on the caliber, though, of psychosis. It's when we imagine personality disorder, we imagine the formation of a personality. And that happens in our childhood. By the time you're 8, and I'm being generous here, your personality is in charge. It's already been installed. And so the way in which we change something that's installed from the get-go is not to try to get rid of it, because that's, then we're going into Shakespeare and out, damn spot, trying to remove the spot that cannot be moved or erased. So it's more a question of giving tools to contain and understand the nature of being a victim or of blaming. But personality disorder and psychosis are levels of intervention that I no longer do. I did my time, but not as an elder in our community.
So to circle back to that perfection compensation, what kind of signs, what kind of things do people bring to that first session that tells you we're going to go after this perfection compensation?
Well, perfectionism comes with anxiety. If I feel inadequate, I'm going to have negotiated with my psyche, with myself, a method of managing it. And anxiety, as troublesome as that is a way of dealing with perfection. It's another form of diagnosis, anxiety disorder. But back to that story I told of the cat falling. There's a rigidity, a control. People will sit there with their arms crossed and legs crossed and represent that And I think control is as close as a synonym as we're going to get to perfectionism, needing to control everything, which if it goes clinical is called obsessive compulsive disorder, where you're obsessed with a thought and you have a habitual behavior to compensate for what you're obsessed with. Like, I'm going to move my cup right now because it's not in the right place. So control, anxiety, and perfectionism are a brood. They all interact.
How do people face the anxiety story?
Well, that's one of the few times where I do recommend medication for the sole purpose. For instance, I would recommend 3 months to 4 months of a certain kind of anti-anxiety medication, so the individual can experience what it's like not to have that anxiety running all the time. Because how can we know anything different than if it's always in play? So to break that cycle of anxiety, and then wean ourselves off that, because the responsibility, of course, is with us individually to come to terms with whatever the presenting problem is. But sometimes we need some help. Otherwise, I have several psychiatrists I work with who prescribe medication, but anxiety and perfection hold hands.
Are there any books that come to mind when someone's going after perfection in my life?
Yeah. I've been very impressed with a book that's been out now for over 20 years probably, but it's called Romancing the Shadow by Connie Zweig. That's a hell of a manual to deconstruct the kind of realms we're talking about and bring them to light.
How do you see it out in the world? What does perfection look like?
Can you spell Botox? Facelift? Obsession with body image? Getting abs? Teeth? Heroes that somehow represent that, whether it be sports or in film, where people idolize a person who seems to is perfect, seems to be perfect. Just this morning on the weekend Today Show or whatever the hell we were watching, there was this gal who had taken on this notion of I have to look better, which included lips and some facial. She looked like a dead person. She was so perfect that there was no life in her, which is what I think we suffer from in a society that idolizes the film industry, the sports industry, and the people who look amazing and have wonderful families and have millions of dollars. Yeah. That's so sad.
And gets everyone chasing that dream or that vision.
Perfection.
Yeah, perfection.
Chasing perfection.
Otherwise, I'm ashamed.
Otherwise, I'm being driven by the belief I have in a lie that by my very nature, I'm not good enough.
Well, thank you for this time.
Yes, Butter.
Thank you so much.
Well, I appreciate the earnest and sincerity of what you are doing here, along with Keith and myself. But I think what we're talking about is important to convey, and I'm wanting to do it in a manner that is intelligible, palpable, comprehensible, and I think we're doing that. So,
Me too.
thank you.
You're welcome. We've reached the end of another session in the Blue Door Playbook, a podcast for the soul, featuring archetypal psychotherapist Timothy Tate. Thanks for listening. I'm Putter Brown. Stay tuned for the next episode, where Timothy explores the concepts of ego, persona, and character. The content in this podcast is strictly for informational and entertainment purposes only. If you are experiencing mental health symptoms, please contact a mental health provider in your community.